everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is actually going to be a video that somebody requested on my last one, and like I've been trying to go through my requests in order, but I saw this and I was like, this is actually such a good revision idea and nobody I know has ever done it, and it is revision tips that aren't useful. So like I'm going to tell you things that may come up in like online or just like in other videos that actually don't help. Now obviously I'm going to do a fat disclaimer. I currently am in revision season. I just got my exam timetable. Look at that, 24 hours of exams over 2 weeks. First week I have literally got like 18 hours of exams, and then I have 6 like a week later. So I just have this awkward week gap, and it's just horrible, and I don't finish till the end of June, and it's just not good. And university exams are just a totally different kettle of fish. So these techniques apply more to GCSE, A-level / school exams, because honestly at A-level, like some of these are not useful, but at uni all I can really do is just sit and stare at my notes because I don't know what else to do. So take these tips with a pinch of salt if you're at uni, but if you're doing your GCSEs or your A-levels, then definitely listen to these tips, because I tried all of these at A-level or GCSE at some point, and I can honestly say that when I was sat in the exam I was like, well, that was a waste of time essentially. So let go. So the first tip, and this is one that, okay, it's like a bit controversial, because it depends. So I think that doing past papers before you've revised everything is not a good idea. Now hear me out. If you're on like an old specification where you have loads of past papers, then you can absolutely afford to perhaps use a couple to see where you're at and to see where your weak points are. But what I mean is, like, say if you're on a new chemistry specification, you only have 2 or 3 past papers, you really want to use those as like your best representation of exam conditions. And if you're wasting them at the start of your revision to see where you need to revise, like, although it might be helpful then, like, you're going to get to the past papers later and you're not going to have any that you haven't like done before, so any representation of how well you're doing close to the exam is not going to work. And I just feel like doing past papers with mark schemes or doing past papers before having like revised at all, like, obviously can be useful. I'm not saying that it's not useful, I'm just saying that it can be a waste of valuable resources. Now obviously if you want to do that, like, absolutely go for it, but what I personally found was most useful, especially with like sciences and things like that, was to make a checklist of the specification and use that to figure out what you don't know, rather than using a past paper. And then when you have covered everything, you can do a past paper and you will be able to have an accurate representation of, if you sat the exam at that point, like what you need to do. And I would personally recommend leaving past papers as sort of like the second to last stage of your revision. So after you've kind of gone over all the content, so like right now at the moment I'm going over content, like that's what I'm doing, and then I have a second stage where I'll like make like quote flashcards on Quizlet and learn like the very specific examples. Then I'll have a stage where I look at past papers and I see the gaps in my knowledge. Then I'll revisit the specific examples and the things that I've covered before, and then the last stage is like just the final push, like banging out past papers and essay plans and stuff. That's how I work. So if you put the past papers too early, like, you're wasting them essentially. So that's tip number 1 not to do. Number 2 is just reading your notes. Right, I know I've just said that is literally what I'm doing, but even when I'm just reading my notes, I'm reading them actively, which is annotating them as I go. So I'm like adding thoughts to my notes, questioning my own notes, adding examples when I can think of them, linking my notes together, like engaging with it. With my like exams this year, they're literally essays, and like there's not really much I can do other than read my lecture notes and my critical reading notes and just sort of do essay plans. Like, that's all I can do. But if you're reading, for example, biology notes, like, make it active, make them into flashcards, put them on mind maps, get somebody to test you on them. Like, don't just sit and read it, because with information like that you need to be actively like tested on it, whereas stuff like literature is very much more like general ideas. But even then, I don't like sitting and just reading and annotating. It's like I don't really have another choice. So like I don't really have much of a choice. But even at GCSE, like, I never really, apart from like right before the exam as sort of a last minute sort of like dash, I never really like sat and read through my notes. Like, I was always making my notes into new forms, like be active with it. I think for me, the actual process of remaking my notes was how I revised. So for example, I take my lesson notes for Of Mice and Men, and then I split it into themes and characters and made new mind maps, which I then got my mum to test me on, and then I knew it. And like, rather than just sitting and reading it, I changed it into flashcards, posters, all these sort of things. I'll come on to posters in a bit, but yeah. So just try and like be dynamic, like make it active. Yeah. Don't just read your notes. The next one, and this is the one that I'm the firmest believer in, and I genuinely will take this thought to the grave of me, and if you are different then I'm sorry, but like it just doesn't work, and that is group study. Like there are certain occasions where group study works, like certain occasions, but genuinely if they're your friends, just don't do it to yourself. Like you will get distracted. Even I get distracted, and you all think that I'm some revision guru. I've tried on multiple occasions to go to Birmingham, have a coffee and revise with friends, and have we done anything? No, we have not. You just end up talking, or you end up having a chat, or you end up just like doing anything else that's not revision. I genuinely feel like, yeah, okay, if you're testing each other in like a casual setting, fine, but don't have like the main bulk of your day like with people around, because a lot of the time like you really just need to get to grips with the information yourself. And whilst group study can be useful as sort of like a sounding board for ideas, occasionally I personally feel like it's good to sort of consolidate and compare and contrast ideas, but not good for learning the bulk of the information. So I mean, feel free to comment down below if you find group study effective, but genuinely I just, unless you're like a seasoned reviser who has the concentration skills of a god, just don't do it. Because even like I've spoken to loads of study tubers and we all are like, group study is just dangerous. Unless you're wanting to have like a chill day and you're wanting to revise but like not revise, then go for it, because it's a nice like laid back one. But if you're like in the throes of your revision, group study is just not the one. Like it's just not the one. The next one is wall posters. You guys will have seen in like loads of my videos I did these, like putting mind maps up on the wall and putting timelines above your bed and things like that. Now, I personally think that the premise of this is great. Like if you were to read those every day before you went to bed, or you to read them when they were on your wall, that would be like such a good, you know, revision technique. But, does anybody ever read them? No, they don't. Like I had a timeline of the civil rights movement above my bed for the best part of 6 months, and I can honestly tell you that I probably read it about 3 times, because I'm not gonna lie, if I'm getting into bed I'm gonna want to watch Netflix. I'm not gonna want to sit and stare at the ceiling for 20 minutes trying to learn when the march from the Montgomery March was, and when the I Have a Dream speech was, and when Brown versus Board of Education was passed and all of that stuff. Like I'm not gonna want to do that, although I did love that topic. So personally I think that whilst wall posters, you may be looking, I'm calling you out now people, you may be looking like you're doing a lot, but like realistically, unless you make the physical effort to read it every single time, I think it's a waste of time. Like it's best to have them in a folder and like revise them that way, rather than leave them on your wall and then just walking past them, because the novelty will wear off very quickly and they'll soon just become part of your surroundings and you won't make the effort. As an alternative to that, like to that revision technique, I think post-it notes do work, like little post-it notes, question and answers. Like if you really are committed to it, like I have post-it notes everywhere for history GCSE, and I can still remember most of the statistics that were on those post-it notes. Like I remember that 1 million African Americans were enrolled in the army in America in World War II, and I can remember exactly where the post-it note was, and that did actually come up in my exam. So I do recommend post-it notes, especially the stair technique. Like if you put post-it notes up your stairs, if your family don't mind, and every time you go up the stairs you have to do it. But again, does anyone realistically do it every time? I think not. So basically with those techniques, just take them with a pinch of salt. Like yes, they are useful, but only if you commit, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I never found anyone that really did. So just be careful out there, people. And the final one is more of like a method of like when to cover things. So I've just kind of gone over like what I do, which is, to recap, is to like go over the information, like the basic content, so you've got everything re-familiarised. Go back and do specifics. So for sciences that would be like making flashcards of equations and stuff, or for literature it would be making like example sheets and quote sheets, and just really like condensing the key things to actually apply in the exam, to like go on from that first base of knowledge. Then to do past papers to see where your weaknesses are, then to go back and fill in the gaps, and then to go back to past papers when you're finally done to like master the exam. Personally, when it comes to covering content, I am such a big believer that you shouldn't do it in blocks. So, for example, say if you were doing an economics exam, and the economics exam had 4 units, right? And those 4 units were kind of like separate from each other. And you were like, right, so I've got 8 weeks until my exam, I'm going to do a unit every 2 weeks, and then I'll be done. That might sound like a really organised way of you doing your time, but I am such a firm believer that spaced repetition is like essential if you want to do it. Because by the time you get to that exam, unit 3 and 4 will be fresh in your head, but 1 and 2 were like 6 weeks ago. Like, that's a long time to have not recovered a topic. So instead of doing 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, it might be better to go 1, 2, 3, 4 and then do again 1, 2, 3, 4. So like 2 blocks of 4 weeks. Or even better would be to revise them in tandem. I'm such a believer that like trying to just keep all of them around at the same time is such a better way of revising. So to give you an example, I don't know, so for Spanish, okay, we'll just use Spanish because that's kind of what's in my head right now. I have 2 literature papers. So I have one which is made of 4 texts and one which is made of 3 different eras of poetry. So like I have these 2 papers, and instead of saying like, oh, the first half of my 6-week vacation I'm going to do this paper of the 4 texts, and the second half I'm going to do the ballads, I've decided to sort of do a bit of both. So for example, today I spent an hour going through the notes for one of the texts on this paper, and I spent 2 hours doing a mind map for this paper, and then I spent another hour going through the notes on another text on this paper. So I'm just trying to keep, like, it might at the time, like it might feel like you're a bit like information overload, but it's so important to keep everything kind of going and balancing and juggling at the same time, because when you come to your exam season, like that's what's going to be happening. Like, you're going to have different exams at different times, but in a very close frame, and you don't want to forget things. So keeping as many aspects of your exams sort of like up at the same time, does that make sense, is really, really useful. To try and concretize this a little bit more, like, so I have German and Spanish, and for those I have translation papers, I have comprehension papers, I have literature papers. So I'm trying to keep all of the texts that we've done, more or less just trying to keep them, not every single one at the same time, like that would be really difficult, but just trying to revisit them constantly. So once I've worked through all 4 texts once, I'll work through them again, rather than just dedicating huge blocks of time to one text and then forgetting about it until the exam. So basically, don't revise in blocks, don't just do a topic and chuck it away. Try and just keep revisiting things as much as you can. And if you want me to do a video on how to timetable things so that you can keep revisiting, then be sure to give this video a thumbs up. But hopefully that makes sense, and that's like my #1 thing that I think is really bad to do, is just to block out sections and not revisit them. So yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative a little bit, and obviously take this with a pinch of salt. If you found it works for you, then absolutely go for it, but I'm just trying to like stop you from wasting time on things that might not necessarily be that useful. From experience, like, those are ones that just don't work for me, and I know don't work for other people as well. So if you're in the minority and they do work for you, good for you. Don't leave any horrible comments, but I'm just trying to, we're not got a lot of time left, people. We need to narrow things down. But yeah, so if you did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up and comment down below any video requests you might have, because honestly, like, some of the best ideas come from you guys. Like, you guys are so creative and just think of things that my revision stricken brain would never think of. And yeah, I'll see you next week, or probably next week with a new video, or maybe earlier, who knows. I'm really excited that the revision videos are back, and yeah, okay, bye guys. Mwah.